Hey guys, welcome to Mr. Paranormal. Today we bought you Creepiest haunted house stories. Hit like if you love this topic. Story 1. I lived in a house that seemed to be haunted by doppelgangers. Every event that happened never involved some mysterious figure, but a known person being in a place where they should not have been. Here are a few examples. I was a teenager at the time, and I was instant messaging my GF at the time with my webcam turned on. I had the viewer up so that I could see myself on the webcam. Behind me, there were the stairs leading up, left of camera view, and the entrance to the living room, right of camera view. My younger sister would typically fall asleep every night on the couch in front of the TV and make her way up to bed in the middle of the night. At one point in my webcam view, I saw my sister leave the living room and go up the stairs. The thing that struck me as odd was that I didn't hear anything. It was an older Victorian house, so the wooden floor and stairs were loud AF. Without saying anything to my GF, I got up and looked into the living room and there was my sister passed out on the couch. I sat back down and asked my GF if she had seen anything in my camera. She said, "Yeah, I just saw your sister go upstairs." My family was all getting ready to go somewhere. I was sitting in the car with my mom and we were waiting on my sister who was still in the house. After a bit, she comes out and gets in the car and just looks at me like WTF? I ask her what was wrong and she says that just before she walked out of the house she thought I was still inside, so she yelled up the stairs my name, "We're leaving." And apparently I yelled back, "Okay, I'll be down in a minute." Some more examples. My mom woke up to someone tapping her foot and she said someone was standing at the end of her bed who faded out after a couple of seconds. She said it looked like me. I had an encounter where I woke up and felt like someone was under my covers laying up against me. When I said something, my blanket visibly deflated and I no longer felt anything. I include this with doppelgangers because though I didn't see what I felt under the blanket, it played like my GF would have played against me. When I was 22 I was in the military and I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. It still took like a year after the diagnosis to separate from the military, but I went home on leave for the holidays about a month after the diagnosis. Anyone that has insulin-dependent diabetes typically carries around some sort of kit. Mine is a black zip-up pouch and it has a glucometer, insulin pen, needles, and alcohol pads. Right after I left home to head back from leave my mom texted me to ask if I'm missing my diabetic kit. I look, and I'm not. She sends me a picture of a diabetic kit and asks if I know it. I've never seen this kit before in my life. My sister went into her bedroom and discovered it outside of her window propped up like someone had set it there. Oh, also, her bedroom is on the second floor. Nobody else we know has diabetes. Story 2. I lived in one when I was a teen, along with my parents. Several instances come to mind. We were remodeling an old farmhouse and had been there a couple of months before witnessing anything. One day I was underneath my truck, which was supported by only a jack. Stupid, I know, I was in the middle of working on it, with no good reason to get out at that moment. Suddenly the overwhelming urge to get out from underneath overwhelmed me. No sooner than I got out, the truck fell to the ground, the jack had slipped. Freaked Dad out, he thought I was under it. When Mom got home, we mentioned it, and she started crying, sobbing pretty hard. It turns out the previous owner died in the driveway, under a vehicle, in that spot. I would often see moving shadows, and strangely hear music from the upstairs area. The windows of the old house were caulked shut, and blackbirds would often get caught between the panes. We ended up replacing all the windows, but we had to break 3 inside panes to get them out. One of the more disturbing things happened when my mother was cooking breakfast. She turned away to get something out of the cabinet and when she turned back around, all the forks set out were bent straight up. Story 3. My uncle's house out in a very eastern part of NY was said to be haunted due to the family that used to own it in the 1800s decided not to give it to the stableman and sold it instead. He and the maid were said to have haunted the place. We always used to joke that you would hear people or things moving at night, but since the house is so old, we used to just laugh it off. My uncle's friend had her and her sister stay over at the house one night and the friend noticed a maid bringing towels down the stairs when she woke. She saw the maid again, bringing what looked like a percolator, down the stairs. She was so impressed by my uncle's hiring staff, he is a neurologist in NYC so he had a habit of spending a little bit extra. She went back to bed and woke up later downstairs to see my uncle and his friend just chatting. She asked where the maid went and she thought that the maid was cooking breakfast. My uncle had no idea what she was talking about and asked what she looked like. The sister explained and he laughed. Walked her to the living room and pointed to an old picture. She said that was the woman. My uncle replied, "Yay, she has been dead for about 100 years. Story 4. My husband and I own a martial arts school, and the building that it's in, which we also own, is about 130 years old. Next to a church. And I never, and still don't really, there has to be another explanation, believed in the paranormal, but the things that happened in it didn't just happen to me. It was decrepit, which was why it was so cheap to purchase, and we did all the work ourselves, old, creaky, and drafty. Still knob and tube that we had to get an electrician to change out. So here's a bunch of things that happened. When we'd be working with like drills and electric saws, I'd hear the tinkling of a music box, and I'd stop everyone to ask if they hear it too. No one else did, so I assumed it must have been some music from the church coming through. My husband would often hear a woman's voice calling his name from the bottom of the stairs. It's 2 floors, a basement, and a loft, and, thinking it was me back from work, would always ask it to come up. Turns out the building was empty. Happened 4 or 5 times. One night, there's a small apartment on the 2nd floor connected to a large hall. We woke up hearing what sounded like a broom sweeping across the wooden floors in the large hall. My husband got up to go check, but once he would walk in there, the sweeping sound would stop. It happened 3 more times that night. We chalked it up to mice or squirrels. We did find mummified squirrels in the attic once. We had a barbecue in the backyard and I needed to go get more utensils. There's a metal stairwell from the backyard up to the 2nd floor, and then there's the main entrance staircase opposite that. I came up the main entrance and heard footsteps pacing back and forth across the far end of the hall and thought my husband came up from the metal stairwell to get utensils with me. It was dark and I couldn't see anything. I called out for him and the pacing stopped. No response, and then the pacing footsteps continued. Annoyed, I thought he was messing with me, so I flipped on the lights and all of the utensils from the shelf where I heard the pacing crash down to the floor like I spooked something. But there wasn't anything, not even a rat like I thought there might be. One Saturday morning, my husband was on his computer in another room. I'm in the apartment playing with a Tamagotchi app on my iPad when I heard the stereo sitting in front of me click on and a girl's voice started talking from it. I thought he controlled the stereo from his computer, so I ignored it because he often puts on music to work out before class starts. He teaches the morning class. I do remember thinking, what kind of weird-ass indie music is he listening to anyway, because the voice just said, "Hi, my name is." I thought I heard Katie, but I'm not 100% sure because I wasn't paying attention. I have never known a Katie in my life. I am _years old. I'm from etc. I didn't catch the specifics because I wasn't listening, but that went on for about 2 or 3 minutes until it suddenly went, "Something's hurting me." And when I caught that, I looked up and squinted at the stereo, like, what? Something's killing me. Something killed me. At this point, the hair is standing on the back of my neck and I'm getting up from the couch to take a closer look. Please, someone tell my parents, tell the teachers, tell the corrections officer. At the word corrections officer, I just bolt into the other room and start yelling at my husband and cursing him out because I was certain he was playing a trick on me. Told him we don't fucking play jokes about dead people. And he's of course looking at me like, WTF? When he finally calms me down long enough to get what I heard out of me and what I was accusing him of, he told me it was impossible and led me to the stereo. It's not plugged in. I thought maybe the stereo picked up the signals from an ebook or something. So after that last fiasco, I went to ask our live-in student who lived with his GF in the basement apartment of the building if anything weird's happened. They shot each other an alarmed look and told me this. His GF was sleeping one night when he was working overnight and she heard footsteps come down the stairs and their door open and they're close. All of a sudden a bright flashlight shines on her face and she can just make out the silhouette of who she thought was her BF because he's tall, and she can see the dirty jeans he's wearing. She's annoyed thinking he's messing with her, so she's swatting at him and telling him to stop. Finally, she gets so pissed off she turns on their lamp and there's no one there. They sometimes hear footsteps on the 1st floor when there's no one in the building. They had a pet mouse at the time and whenever that happened it would start doing backflips in its tank. However, when class is going on and there are people in the building, the mouse didn't care and just went about its mousy business. They were playing wrestling one day when suddenly, their African gray parrot ruffled its feathers and in an alarming voice asked, "Who's there? Who's there?" They thought it was funny at first, so our student looked at the bird and pointed to the door and said, "You mean over here?" and ran towards the door to open it. As he did that, all the books that were lining the shelf on the way to the door fell over in front of him and the lights started flickering. The bird and the mouse both got spooked and were throwing themselves against their cages. Our second live-in student after the first one got married to his GF, got their own home, had a baby, several times could just not find his phone when he woke up in the morning when he had placed it next to his bed the night before. He would search his room high and low and then he'd find it perfectly placed right outside his locked bedroom door on the floor. I thought he might have been sleepwalking, but his GF says she'd realize it if he did since she's a very light sleeper. So don't know what that's about. Nothing notable has happened since then, but we have also not had anyone stay there overnight in years. Story 5. When I was younger, I used to take naps upstairs, but by the time I was 8 years old I refused to go upstairs. The upstairs had 2 large closets? Attics? They ran from one side of the upstairs to the other side on both sides. It was essentially a crawl space that was maybe 30 feet long. It started one day when a friend and I went crawling from one side to the other with flashlights like kids normally do. Then I saw a girl, sitting there, in the corner acting like she wanted to play with us. I know a lot of people say when they see a ghost they aren't scared. Just interested. Nope, I was beyond terrified. This girl looked normal, had blonde hair, a nice dress, and seemed friendly. I stayed silent, kept crawling behind my friend, and got out of the closet. Told him what I saw in there. He said he didn't see it, but felt like he didn't want to go back in. Then my parents would occasionally send me upstairs to get something, and when I would get up there I would see the doors swing open. As if they were trying to get me to come inside. I would lose toys and wouldn't be able to find them anywhere. Suddenly, my parents would be fishing out Christmas presents out of the attic and we would find some of my toys in there. I remember being 8 years old, my parents are asleep still in the morning and I leashed up my dog to go take on the monster in the attic. My dog is usually up for anything, refused to go off the top step into the attic. My parents never believed me about all the weird things that happened in that house. I would get blamed for things that happened all over the house. Leaving lights on, toys all over, things I knew I didn't do. Well, anyway, we move out of there when I am 10. Not a week passes before the new owners call us up and ask if the house is haunted. Their daughter sleeps upstairs. She says that she has been playing with a blonde-haired girl at night. My parents laughed at how crazy these new homeowners must be. To make an already long story short, the girl started appearing in other parts of the house for them. They kept in contact with us. They would look over while watching TV and see the girl sitting on their daughter's lap, etc. They looked upon the computer the past owners of the house, found an old dressmaker that lived there, and yep, a picture of the little girl wearing one of the ladies' dresses. The family that moved in there was torn apart by the events. Got divorced, Dad stayed living in the house and ended up taking his own life in that house. Story 6. I'll begin by saying I'm personally more on the side of a skeptic frame of mind with any paranormal experience, but enough things have happened in the last year to make me at least question that and entertain the possibility that this is legit and not just my daughter's active imagination. These events have occurred only in the house my husband and I bought in June of 2017, which was built in the 1920s. First, in October of 2017, I was laying her down for bed, in the dark, with only moonlight lighting the bedroom. She pointed across the room and asked, "Mom, who's that guy?" I looked for a toy or something she could be referring to but saw nothing, so I asked, "What guy, honey?" She responded that he was right there and gestured toward the closed bedroom door. Still curious, I asked her what he was doing, in case I could piece together some recent episode of pretend play or a toy she commonly talked about. She said he was hiding. I asked if he was scared. She said, "No, he's hiding." Creepy. During this whole exchange, she was calm and chipper, not scared. What made it strange was that she was 2 at the time and didn't engage in pretend play or storytelling at that point, and as I mentioned, no toys were in sight. From there we just had a funny toddler story to tell our friends and family that we affectionately named that guy. This is the umbrella name we generally use for any other episodes or weird stuff that happens around the house. That guy is pulling a prank. Next, in Jan or February of 2018, I was again laying her down for bed along with her then 6-month-old brother. We were doing the usual cuddle up night talk, when she said something along the lines of, "Now it's time for bed. Just me and you and him and her." My skeptical mind would argue that him could easily have been her little bro, but at the time she was still adjusting to having a sibling and rarely mentioned him, and he wasn't included in any of her talk that we were just having. What was strange, was her. Who's her? The only other female in the house is our cat and she wasn't in the room at the time. Also, no toys were in bed with us and none were in the near vicinity of her bed that she could have been talking about. A little later that spring, a new name came into conversation, Mr. Longneck. Short backstory, my daughter has this weird thing where she likes touching necks. Sometimes it's cuddly, sometimes it's when she's playing. We can't explain it other than kids do weird stuff sometimes, and it started before we moved into this house. Anyway, She was getting put down for a nap and was a little high-strung. She was doing her usual neck grabbing the thing and suddenly did it a little tougher than usual, but not enough to hurt, and said in a growly voice, "Mr. Longneck." Mr. Longneck. I had never heard her use this name, and it isn't a character in any YouTube or Netflix show she watches, so I asked who Mr. Longneck was. She just kind of giggled it off and was asleep 10 minutes later. This was when I started getting creeped out a bit by her stories. In April of 2018, my husband found a time capsule in one of our heating vents and we spent the afternoon looking through it. There had been a fire in our home in 2009, which we knew about and in which no one was hurt. During the renovation after the fire, the owners at the time found a bunch of old stuff on the walls and included it with some pictures of the fire and a couple of newspaper clippings. Among the old stuff was a pack of pearl buttons, some store catalogs from the 1940s, and a small notebook with some handwritten names inside. I presume these are the names of the original inhabitants, and I plan to find the book again and look up the history behind the names inside as well as the home. After all this, my husband and I are suspicious that if there is something paranormal going on, maybe these objects are keeping some energy here or something. I know this is long, but we're almost done here. In about October 2018, I was driving to my mother's house with only my son and daughter in the car. Along the way, daughter, now 3, asked from the back seat, "Mom, is that Grandpa?" I said, "Where?" She pointed to the empty front seat and said, "Right there." I told her Grandpa was at home, as he had just recently moved in with us due to health issues. There was no one around on the street or sidewalks for her to point at, either. Now, there have been minor other events that have happened, but these were the biggest ones to describe in detail. I've posted this in another subreddit as well and received advice to engage her further in conversation when it comes up. While we have to an extent encouraged her to be comfortable talking about it, I never pushed it, to avoid leading the conversation or pulling answers out of her that she would offer just to appease the conversation. One day, though, and a few times after, I just decided to ask her about it. Below is a brief detail of what she has said in roughly the past month. Me, can you tell me about that guy? Daughter, what guy? M, you don't remember that guy? D, no. M, what about Mr. Longneck? D, oh. Yeah. Face lights up. M, can you tell me about him? And various other questions lead to. Mr. Longneck is a grown-up. He wears monster clothes and a hat. He is nice but also scary. He says trick or treat but doesn't wear a costume. He lives far away and goes with Santa in the sky to his house where he belongs. She says he comes to our house at nap time, which she no longer has but was generally the afternoon. He knocks on our big door, patio door, and walks through the kitchen. These were her exact words, and while she was telling me this, was pointing a path from the door to one of our living room windows. I asked what he says or does, and among a few things, she mentioned he played in the kitchen with her with the spinny cow toy. This is one of those Fisher-Price pull-string farm toys. She never plays with it, I rarely see it and have never seen it in the kitchen. The specific details of this piqued my interest for sure. I also asked if he ever brought a friend, to see if I could follow up on the her mentioned earlier. He brings a friend, she is a little girl, not a grown-up, and has yellow hair like me. She is never scared of these talks, although she withdraws from the conversation when I ask about his neck and why it is long. Story 7. The house I grew up in had a slightly strange design in that all the bedrooms were clumped together at one end of the house and the kitchen and living room were at the other end. The two areas were connected by a long, narrow hallway that had a bathroom in the middle and approximately 900 closets on either side. My bedroom door was at the end of the hall, with two other bedroom doors facing each other across the hall on either side. This meant that if you were sitting in our living room you could look straight down the hallway to my bedroom door. Now, lots of strange and frightening things happened in that house, but the one thing that we could never rationalize away or lie to ourselves about was the darkness at the end of the hall. Like I said above, the hallway was very long and narrow, and it was also paneled in a dark wood, so it was pretty dark down there. But with the living room lights on there was always enough light to see down the hall and make out my bedroom door. But sometimes we'd be sitting in the living room and get the feeling that we were being watched, or that something was about to happen. When that would come over us, the end of the hallway would be completely blacked out. It was like someone dropped a curtain over the end of the hall. You could see part of the way down, and then there was just blackness. When this would happen, our 3 little dogs, God bless them, would go to the mouth of the hallway and sit in a line across it, staring down into the darkness. Sometimes they'd bark a little, or growl, but mostly they just sat and stared. Once in a while one of them would get brave enough to walk down the hall, but they never got more than halfway to the darkness before they'd stop and back up. They would walk back up the hall, never turning their back on whatever they were looking at. After a little while the oppressive feeling would lift, the darkness would disappear, and the dogs would wander off. This didn't happen often, but compared to all the normal spookiness in that house, things disappearing, stuff flying off shelves, strange voices or breezes, etc., that was the one thing we could never convince ourselves was just in our heads. Story 8. I lived in a haunted house for 10 years. I had 5 kids while living there. Every one of my kids saw the man in the hat on the wall. And they all saw him between the ages of 2 to 5. My kids turned 6 and they stopped seeing him. Once I heard my son screaming for me in the middle of the night. I went to him. He was 5. And he begged me to make his drawers stop. I said, "Stop what, hun?" And he said, "They keep opening and slamming shut, I can't sleep because it's too noisy." Things got moved all the time. And lost all the time. The spirit did not like babysitters and would torment everyone. The most violent episode was when I let my 15-year-old brother watch my kids. We got home around 2 a.m. and found my brother sitting on the steps in the hallway between the front door and the kids' bedrooms. He was shaking and crying. He said that when he got the kids in bed, the pounding started. Everywhere all over the house. At one point it was so bad he went outside to see if there were people outside hitting the house. There was no one there. He had gone out the back door to check. When he walked back inside he saw the reflection of someone in the mirror. Walking up the steps to the kids' rooms. He went running thinking that someone snuck in when he was outside. He checked everywhere and there was no one in the house. But when he was upstairs he saw a shadowy figure streak around the corner of the steps. He heard the front door open and shut. He went running down the steps but the door was closed and locked. He proceeded to spend the next 3 hours chasing this shadow and hearing the doors open and close. He never babysat for us again. No one would. I had lights shatter above our heads and my children would laugh and talk to people in their rooms. We had neighbors call us at all hours of the night asking if we were okay because they saw gangs of people in our yard and sneaking around our windows. The cops got so used to getting the same 911 call that they stationed a cop in back of our house to watch our house between 2 and 3 a.m. There are so many more scary stories and the nightmares I had living there were deathly scary. We moved and the people that moved in after us stayed for a month, they said it was too scary. The house has been vacant now for 8 years. I have more stories but I think I already made a novel here. Thanks for watching. Don't leave before leaving a like to this video, also hit the subscribe button to support my work. And as always, have a horrific nightmare my dear.